My name is Margaret Ellery Colton, though everyone in my hometown just calls me Maggie. I'm 36 years old, and last Thanksgiving, my father stood up at the head of the table, raised his glass, and told me I was getting nothing. My family clapped. They actually clapped, while he announced he was selling our three-generation furniture business for $62 million. Then he said the buyer's name out loud, proud as a roaster, rolling it around his mouth like good whiskey. And I sat there with my hands folded in my lap, because I was the only person at that table who knew whose signature was on the other side of that deal. Everyone in my family remembers what happened next. It's the story they tell at every wedding and funeral in 2 counties now. But here's what none of them knows. The part that actually mattered didn't happen at Thanksgiving. It happened 19 days later. In a room with no turkey, 3 lawyers, and a single folded piece of paper I slid across a table. What that piece of paper cost me is the real story. If you've ever been written off at your own family's table, told to go help in the kitchen while your name got left off the ledger, stay with me. This one's for you. To understand what $62 million was actually buying, you have to picture a furniture workshop in Belhaven, Vermont, in the late 1990s. Through the eyes of a 6-year-old sitting on a stack of pine boards. Colton and Sons Fine Furniture. My grandfather, Walter Colton, opened the first workshop behind his house in 1961. With a loan he paid off 1 chair at a time. By the time I came along, there were 4 showrooms and a full production mill. And the whole town smelled faintly of cedar shavings because of us. I grew up underfoot of that mill. I sanded my first tabletop before I could spell my own last name. I learned board feet math before long division, because Grandpa Walter taught arithmetic with a tape measure. When the shop ledger didn't balance, it was me he handed the pencil to. Age 8. Because in his words, Maggie finds it. She always finds it. That same year he taught me to read a spirit level. His old brass one, bought in 1961 and trusted more than most men. You watch the bubble, he told me. People will tell you a joint is square. A deal is fair. A man is honest. The bubble never lies. I loved that workshop the way other girls loved horses. I knew every joint, every finish, every squeak in the floorboards by the varnish room. By 9, I could balance the books on the first pass. It took me another 27 years to learn what I could never balance, no matter how many times I ran the numbers. It wasn't in the ledger. It was standing at the end of the workbench in a canvas apron, teaching my brother to run the table saw with his back to me. Nobody in my family ever said out loud that the business would go to my brother, Nathaniel. They didn't have to. It was said in 100 quieter ways. The way small towns say everything. When Nathaniel turned 12, my father took him on delivery runs to learn the trade. When I turned 12, my father told me I had a gift for keeping things tidy and sent me inside to help my mother with the church bake sale. Nathaniel got a name tag. I got a compliment. There was a schedule board in the back of the mill, a whiteboard grid with every employee's name listed. Full-timers, part-timers, even the high school kid who swept sawdust on Saturdays. Everyone who belonged to that shop was on that board. In 18 years of working there for free, my name was never written on it. Not once. I used to stand in the mill and look at that grid the way other people look at family photographs they're not in. I want to be fair, because fairness matters to me. My father was never cruel. He never mocked me, never raised his voice, never once made me cry on that workshop floor. He did something quieter, and I'd argue far more expensive. He exempted me from the weight of it, from the will, from all of it like a tax he thought I was too delicate to pay. He genuinely believed that was love. It took me almost 30 years and a lawyer's conference room in December to understand what it actually was. The year I turned 24. The business started dying. a national furniture chain, opened 25 minutes away. And our showroom floor emptied out month by month like a slow leak. My father's answer was to work harder at the same things that weren't working. I had just finished my business degree at night. 3 years of classes stacked on top of full days doing the shop's books. Unpaid and unlisted. Like a ghost with a calculator. So I did what hopeful daughters do. I wrote a plan, 31 pages. I still remember the sections shift from walk-in retail to direct online ordering. Build custom commission accounts for interior designers. Put inventory on real software instead of memory. Turn the mill into a regional fulfillment hub. I printed it at the library, bound it with a black spine, and set it on my father's desk on a Tuesday morning. I stood there while he read it. The way you stand for a verdict. He read 3 pages. Maybe 4. Then he squared the edges. Set it on the corner of his desk. Looked at me with something close to kindness, which is the part I've never forgiven, and said, "Furniture isn't a business for girls, Maggie." Then he asked if I could bring lunch out to Nathaniel at the mill. Within a year, I was gone. I moved to Burlington. An hour and a half and an entire universe away. The plan stayed behind on his desk. To this day, I couldn't tell you what happened to those 31 pages. Hold on to that. It comes back. I arrived in Burlington with $11,000 in savings. A laptop with a cracked hinge. And a theory, if my father wouldn't run his supply chain on software. Other furniture makers' fathers might. I named the company Cedar Line. The name wasn't ambition, it came from a night in the mill when I was small. Watching Grandpa Walter eye a warped stack of boards and say, "Somebody's got to straighten that pile." And it's always us. Cedar Line builds inventory and fulfillment software for furniture manufacturers and retailers. In other words, I sold my father's rejected 31 pages. One feature at a time. To every furniture maker in New England except him. The first year, I made almost nothing and slept in the office twice a week. By the 5th year, we'd passed 100 employees. Last year, we served over 900 furniture businesses across 28 states. And I still drove a car with 200,000 miles on it. Because spending the money always felt like admitting something. Here's the part I'm less proud of. I built that company like a fortress. No partners with real power. No mentors. Nobody close enough to tell me no. My chief operating officer once said, not unkindly, that I ran Cedar Line like a woman who'd been robbed once and now slept on top of the safe. I told him that was ridiculous. Then went home to a house I'd bought alone, ate dinner alone, and reviewed the quarterly numbers alone, feeling perfectly safe. If nobody was allowed to help me, nobody could refuse me either. That was my arithmetic for 9 years. It worked beautifully. Right up until a 2-page summary landed quietly in our acquisitions inbox. By then, my family and I were something politer and sadder than estranged. My mother, Louise, called every Sunday at 4, and we talked about her garden and my weather. Never the business. By unspoken agreement, I drove home twice a year, for Easter and Thanksgiving, and sat at the far end of the table like a well-dressed roomer. Nathaniel had become vice president of operations, a title my father invented the way you'd pin a medal on a boy for simply showing up. Then one Sunday in late summer, in the middle of the garden report, my mother lowered her voice like the kitchen had ears and said, "Your father met with some men in suits on Tuesday. After the shop closed, he'd worn his funeral jacket. My mother thought it was bankers, and feared it. I ran a software company that served hundreds of furniture businesses, and I knew the difference between bankers and brokers. Somebody wasn't lending money to save the shop. Somebody was measuring it for a sale. The anonymous summary brokers call it a teaser arrived on a Thursday in early fall. Regional furniture manufacturer. 4 showrooms plus production mill. Roughly $90 million in annual revenue. 210 employees. Founder owned. Motivated seller. My head of acquisitions. A sharp, careful man named Desmond walked into my office with the same page and said, "This one's practically in your backyard. Boss. Worth a look." And I heard myself say, in a voice I didn't fully recognize, "Yes, but I stay off the calls." I told Desmond it was standard. Practice anonymity keeps negotiations clean. That's true. But it's not why I did it. I hid my name because a hidden name can't be handed back and refused. If my father knew who was reaching for the shop, he could do to this offer exactly what he did to my 31 pages. Anonymous. I couldn't be turned away. Cedarline bid through a holding entity. And somewhere in Belhaven, my father started telling my mother things were finally turning around. In the middle of November, a non-binding letter of intent was signed at $62 million. A number I set myself, against my own analysts, who wanted to open lower. I called it strategic geography and closed the discussion, because none of them knew they were pricing my grandfather's front door. That night, my mother called off her usual schedule. "You're coming for Thanksgiving," she said, her voice full of bells. "Your father has news. Good news. Honey, the first good news in years." I said yes. I hung up and sat with my tea going cold, turning over the strangest, most human thought I'd had in 9 years. He sounds proud. I wonder who he thinks he's proud of. Now. Thanksgiving. My parents' house in Belhaven. The good tablecloth. 12 people at the table. My father wore a collared shirt and kept touching his water glass without drinking. Nathaniel arrived in a new coat with the swagger of a man who has seen a number with 8 figures and believes some of it belongs to him. My father stood between the turkey and the pie and tapped his glass. "Family, I have an announcement. We're selling. It's done. Papers are moving. $62 million. The number landed on the table like a flock of birds. Nathaniel was on his feet before the echo died. Whooping. Then my father turned to me, and that same terrible kindness settled over his face. "Maggie, I want to say this plain, so there's no whispering later. The proceeds go to the people who built this business. Your brother put in the years. You left." He paused, and the pause was worse than the sentence. "You're getting nothing." Nathaniel clapped. My mother's spoon slipped from her fingers and rang against her plate, and nobody picked it up. I unfolded my napkin, smoothed it flat, and asked the one question nobody else had thought to ask. "Dad, who's the buyer?" My father straightened. "Savoring it. Software people. Out of Burlington. Big outfit. Been buying up the industry." Then, the line that made it art. They know a well-run operation when they see one. Nobody at the table recognized the name. I sat with my hands in my lap, feeling something enormous rearrange itself in my chest. There is no outside board at Cedarline. There is a founder who owns the controlling stake and keeps her name off the deal calls as a matter of practice. I had maybe 90 seconds to choose between the plan, smile, say congratulations, tell them gently in January, and the truth. My father raised his glass. "To the buyer," he said. "Whoever they are." "Dad," I said into the toast. "I am the buyer." The silence that follows a sentence like that has a specific quality. It's the sound of a room recalculating. Nathaniel laughed first. One short bark. The laugh of a man declining a fact. I said it again. Slower. "Cedarline is my company. I founded it 9 years ago. I own it. That signature your broker's been carrying around Belhaven, that's mine." My sister-in-law had her phone out, thumbs moving. She found the company page. The deliberately plain bio founder and CEO. M. Colton. She turned the screen toward Nathaniel without a word. My father lowered his glass 1 inch at a time and said the sentence I will be quoting to a therapist for the rest of my life. Not how. Not when. Not why. He looked at his daughter, the woman paying him $62 million, and said quietly, "Is this some kind of joke you bought?" Nobody ate the pie. My father left his own table before coffee, and the porch light stayed off. I found him the next morning at the mill, standing under the old fluorescent lights at Grandpa Walter's workbench, his coffee going cold. He reached into the drawer that sticks and took out my grandfather's spirit level. Brass. Dented at one end. Bought in 1961. He held it out flat on both palms, then drew it back before I could take it. "I'm showing you," he said. Not giving. He slid the drawer shut. Monday morning. My father called his broker and told him to find another buyer. A liquidation firm out of Boston offered $58 million, $4 million less than mine, with a plan that wasn't a secret. Because plans like theirs never are, sell the real estate under 2 of the 4 showrooms. Close them. Keep the mill and the delivery contracts. And right-size the workforce. 210 employees. My father, who knew half their children's names, was willing to sign it. Because the alternative was endorsing a check with his daughter's name on it. That same week, due diligence surfaced a problem. Our accountants found nearly $3 million in past due supplier debt that appeared nowhere in the seller's financials, invoices shuffled. Credit extensions signed quietly. All under my brother's signature. 2 years earlier, when my father's eyesight started failing, he'd handed Nathaniel the books. It wasn't theft. It was worse. In a way, it was a drowning man hiding the water, moving the whole 1 column over every quarter while he smiled at Sunday dinner and told my father the mill was turning around. I sat alone with that folder until the cleaning crew came through. I could read it out loud in the closing room and detonate both deals at once, humiliate my father, expose my brother, and buy the shop at a liquidation price. Real, documented leverage. The exact currency my family had always traded in. 3 days before closing, my brother showed up at my office in Burlington. Uninvited. Still in his coat. He knew what our accountants had found. His offer, stripped of 40 minutes of family loyalty speeches, was this: I keep quiet about the debt. And in exchange, he convinces our father to drop the liquidation offer and let me buy the shop instead. I can deliver him, he said, recovering a little swagger. That's worth something. Right, I told him no. To both halves. Then what did I want? He asked. And for once in his loud life, he sounded about 9 years old too. For it to end clean. I said, one of us has to stop playing the family game. That night, alone at my kitchen table, I laid it all out like a surgeon's tray, the purchase agreement on one side, the liquidation term sheet on the other, and the folder in the middle. I rehearsed reading it out loud. I had the sentences memorized. And then I thought about the drawer that sticks. My whole family ran on exactly this fuel: things known and never said. Spent at the moment of maximum damage. My father hiding the sale until he could unveil it. My brother hiding the debt. Me hiding my own name inside a holding company. 3 generations of people who would rather keep a secret than keep each other. And every one of us calling it strength. If I read that folder out loud, I would win the shop by being the best Colton in family history at the family sport. My grandfather's bubble sat dead center on that thought and would not move. 19 days after Thanksgiving, in a small conference room in Belhaven. My father, my brother, both sets of lawyers, and I sat around a table with cold coffee. My father opened by saying he was there as a courtesy, that the other offer closed at 2 o'clock. But it seemed proper to hear mine out first. I opened my folder and took out a single sheet. Folded once, no exhibits. No theater. I slid it across the table to my father alone. Read it. Just you. My brother made a small sound. The sound a man makes when an elevator drops an inch. He didn't know what was on the page. But he knew my face. And he knew his own ledger. My father read it. And I watched 3 bad years and 1 frightened son land on him, line by line. Nathaniel broke before anyone accused him of anything. He stood up. Chair scraping. And it poured out of him. The extensions. The shuffled invoices. 2 years of quiet drowning. I was handling it. He said, pointing at me. You left. You got to leave. I stayed and drowned in it. And everyone clapped for me while I went down. The room went still. My father folded the page back along its crease and asked me what I wanted. Here is what I could have said. I could have recut my offer lower. And his own lawyer would have made him take it. I could have demanded a public apology. Itemized the plan. The schedule board. All of it. I had him exactly where I'd wanted him for 25 years, needing my next sentence. And standing inside all that leverage, I finally saw it for what it was, the family sport. Championship round. And me holding the best secret at the table. So this is what I actually said. Here's my offer. Dad. Same number. $62 million. I know about the debt now. And I'm paying anyway. Because the name on that sign is worth more to me than the truth is worth as a weapon. Then I laid out 2 conditions. Every one of the 210 employees keeps their job for a minimum of 3 years. In writing. And the name on the sign stays Colton. Not Cedarline. Then I gave him the honest ledger. Because he deserved to be sold to straight. There was no fun behind me anymore. I'd borrowed against my company shares and my own house to cover the shortfall myself. You'd be selling to your daughter, I said. And everything she owns. That's the whole offer. It doesn't get better at 2 o'clock. It just gets smaller. My father sat with his hand on that folded page for a long time. Then he said, why I told him the only truth I had left. You told me I was getting nothing. You were right. Nothing is what I built with. Turns out it's enough. If you start early enough. He took off his glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose. I sat where you're sitting once. He said quietly. 1988. Your grandfather had a buyer for the mill. I talked him out of it in this same building. Because I couldn't stand for it to go to strangers. I just never had the money to buy my way out of my own opinion. You did. That's the whole difference between us. It is the closest thing to an apology I have ever received from my father. And it wasn't one. I've decided that's all right. He picked up the pen and signed like a man, setting down something heavy at the end of a long carry. Then he reached into his jacket pocket, took out Grandpa Walter's spirit level, and slid it across the table to me. Dented end first. Without a word. It's spring now. The sign over the showroom still says Colton Fine Furniture. Fresh paint. Same name. We run fulfillment out of the old mill. My 31-page plan finally standing on its own 2 feet. This past quarter was the first. In 4 years the company didn't lose money. In a shop like that. In a town like that. Breaking even is a parade. My brother resigned the week after closing. We didn't prosecute. His debt is being repaid in installments. On paper. With his own signature. Which I insisted on. And which I think was the first honest arithmetic of his adult life. He waves at me in traffic now. Which is more than we managed in 9 years. My mother calls every Sunday and talks about her garden. And about my father. Who at 64 has developed a habit nobody assigned him. He shows up Saturday mornings. Reports to no one. And quietly squares the shop, fixes a hinge. Checks a joint. Walks the floor like a retired captain who can't sleep on land. We don't discuss the deal. We discuss inventory. I keep the level on my desk in the Bellhaven office now. Bubble dead center. I have never in my life been so far out over my own ledger. And I have never slept so well. Here is the one thing I know now that I didn't know at that Thanksgiving table. I spent 9 years building a company that was really a 9-year application for my father's approval. And the first piece of paper I ever signed for myself was the one everybody in that room thought would ruin me. If someone at your table has been auditioning for a love that should have been free, tell them their story today. Don't wait for a folder in a conference room. And if you've ever sat where I sat, tell me below what you would have done with that folder. You're already enough.